Good morning. My name is Dave Peterson. I'm from the Department of Political Science, and I'm the director of the Harkin Institute for Public Policy here at Iowa State. And it's my pleasure today to be introducing our speaker, His Excellency Roman Kern, the Slovenian ambassador to the United States. Slovenia is an interesting a country that has become a real leader and model in Europe. It gained its independence in 1991. It joined the EU and NATO in 2004. It was the first transition country to join the Eurozone. It was the first post-communist country to hold the presidency of the Council of the EU. And throughout all of that time, Ambassador Kern has played an integral role in the foreign policy of his country. In 1991, he was the director of Multilateral Relations Department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Prague. He was the state undersecretary in the foreign ministry, where his work included negotiations on the prohibition of the use of landmines. In 1997, he was in charge of the candidacy for Slovenia to gain for the first time to gain a seat on the UN Security Council. From 2000 to 2002, he was the ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. He was Slovenia's permanent representative to the UN from 2002 to 2006, where he was vice president of the General Assembly and was instrumental in the UN's efforts on non-proliferation. Prior to his current position, he served as director of the Department of North and Latin American and the Caribbean for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the head of the transatlantic relations, and was in charge of preparation for the EU-US summit during Slovenia's term as the EU president. He's joined us today to draw on his vast experience and to talk about Slovenia, the European Union, and the global financial crisis. We look forward to his comments.
Good morning to everybody. It's good to be here. It's my first time. And I wish to thank you for a kind invitation to address to you this morning. You have a great place from what I have seen while driving through. I was not sure whether I was entering the city or university, but obviously your university is the city in itself. You know, Slovenia is small and everything is much smaller, but we like to think in broad terms. That's maybe one of our advantages. I want to speak to you today on the European Union and its financial crisis, Euro crisis, as they call it, because that makes the news of the day, and I guess there is a vast interest in hearing from somebody who's coming from within. In Slovenia, unlike some other countries, we like to think forward. You know, we are forward-looking. We think for the future always. We don't dwell much on the past because, the past means the facts that you cannot change. But you can change the future by projecting visions, providing leadership. And that is basically what Slovenians we are after too. But to address the issue that I want to address to you today, I fear I have to go back to the history, because understanding the history is of critical importance to understand the moment that we live in today and to design solutions for the future. So, as EU-Euro crisis makes headlines today, that of course calls attentions of everybody what's going on, and we are so much tempted, so often we are tempted to find, simplified answers to that. And the answers really are not that simple. Now, let me maybe start at the beginning with a few notes on Slovenia, because Slovenia is a part of EU, but where did it came from? How Slovenia came to the world stage? I bet that maybe only few of you know about Slovenia's history before it became an EU member. Slovenia is a young state but a very old nation. A nation of 2 million people to survive throughout the history, it means that it has gained a unique experience to make that happen, because the history was turbulent. For the past 600 years, Slovenia was in different, compositions, mainly ruled by Habsburgs, and that made, our history extremely dynamical. You live in a state which is, having 200 and more years, and you have basically a very, defined course. You have one flag for over 200 years. In Slovenia, for the last 100 years, we changed 6 flags. And I changed 2 flags, which means that's not that much, but my father, grandparents, they have changed many flags, many passports. That is just to, highlight the extreme dynamics of the history in the past 100 years. Now, how states are born? It's an interesting issue. If I just refer to the latest history, after the First World War, it was critical for Europe when empires have collapsed. And those empires embraced a number of nations, which then claimed independence and gained independence. At that time, Slovenes had option to decide where they want to live. Obviously, the conditions were not ripe yet for Slovenia to become independent state. But options were created already. Either we want to continue to live with Austria, or we want to associate us with other South Slavic nations. We opted for South Slavic nations. Was that a good decision? I would guess it was, because I can hardly imagine if we would opt for Austria, the remnants of Austro-Hungarian Empire, that we would be able to preserve fully our identity and further nurture our desire for our statehood sometime in the future. In South Slavic community, well, these options were greater. It was, of course, not that good company, as some would say. But it provided us with the, living space where we could freely develop further on our identity. So, end of World War I was critical. Also, as you know, many other states came up at that moment. If you see globally how states were born, in 45, only 51 states were members of UN. Now there are 193. So, we are witnessing an extremely dynamic process on the global scene. Now, thirdly, what has happened, and that is now critical for understanding of nowadays European landscape. What has happened 1989, 1990, with the fall of the Berlin Wall? Democracy came into the part of Europe that was lacking for some decades, especially starting with the end of the Second World War. So conditions were created for Europe to be reunited. But that also means that democracy entered, the main gate, and that some societies were crushed, they were challenged, and not everybody was ready, to cope with that challenge. That's why, in fact, multinational states faced severe challenge and crisis. You may call it empire, but I will call them multinational states. This is referring to Soviet Union, to Czechoslovakia, to Yugoslavia. All these collapsed. Why did that happen? My explanation is that happened because these countries, these societies, had no valid democratic instruments to deal with diversity within their own countries. Because we have multinational states also elsewhere in Europe, as you know. In Belgium, in Spain. But they are able to cope with the differences within. Yugoslavia was a special case. I don't say that it was, its destiny that this disintegration of this multinational society ended up violently. But it was a special case because of the nature of its diversity. Yugoslavia consisted of 6 federal states or republics, as we call them, and 2 provinces. So to say 6 and 2 entities. Why 2? Because one of these 2 entities became recently, a few years back, independent, Kosovo. And Iowa is a partner to Kosovo now with the National Guard. They're helping them. Yugoslavia was a community of 5 nations, 3 religions, 3 languages, 2 alphabets, extreme diversity. So when the Berlin Wall fell down and democracy entered, it showed that this Yugoslavia had no tools, instrument to deal with this diversity. And that was the main reason for its disintegration. So that is where Slovenia came up, of the recognition that life is not possible to be continued within this framework. We chose the European way. We chose that at the moment where I said Slovenia was forward-looking always. We chose to go fast with Europe. One part of Yugoslavia chose to look backwards, and this was not able to be conceived, so we broke up. Of course, favorable historical conditions are always needed for countries, to enter in the global scene. But you also need leadership that recognizes the true moment in the history to take bold decisions. I will tell you later on why I think this is of critical importance. And thirdly, you need, of course, also your own citizens to express their will to follow certain paths in the history. And overwhelmingly, Slovenian nation opted for independence. But at the same time, we opted for Europe. Now, what has happened with European Union? Here, allow me also to go a little bit back to the history. You all know Europe as a continent. It's an old continent. In the United States, you often refer it as an old continent, which means sterile even, with thousands of years of history. And nation states were born there. I guess many of you are coming from Europe. In 1848, there was a spring of nations in Europe. That was moment to great extent that designed nowadays Europe. Even Slovenians at that time, it was the first time that they have designed a political philosophy in 1848. So when we are referring now to European Union and its deficiencies, shortcomings, do not forget that European Union is only 60 years old. So it is rather new project, and it is project in making. And if we understand that, then maybe we can have some more mercy in predicting the future of European Union. Because in the United States, I so often see catastrophic scenarios, that European Union will disappear, this and that. I think there is no place for such scenarios. European Union is there and will remain there, but of course, as every society, every institutional framework that you live in, from time to time, you are challenged with the test of time. So, European Union started to integrate thanks to two basic incentives. Do not forget that Europe caused 2 world wars, and in both 2 world wars, the United States were involved, critically involved. And after the Second World War, United States demonstrated that leadership, that vision, to create conditions where no future war will be needed for U.S. interference into the European affairs, because after all, a lot of American soldiers died in Europe just to protect the set of values that now we share. So, for the beginning of the European integration process, the role of the United States was critical in enhancing this process, in encouraging this process, starting with Marshall Plan, which was aimed to economically to revive European economy, and then to encourage countries and leaders to start talk and design the future of their own. Second element was Franco-German reconciliation process. Franco-German partnership is even nowadays the engine of European integration. Both these two factors remain relevant as we speak today. American support, presence in what Europeans are aimed to, and this strong Franco-German partnership. Now, European Union then witnessed 2 processes, which are now, in a way, in a conflict. On one track, there was a process of integration, further expansion. Europe, as you know, European Union expanded, each year embracing new countries. And the other process is the deepening of the European Union. That means strengthening its institutions, its capacity to work as a new entity. These 2 processes came into conflict. The true process of European integration, to my mind, started only in 2004. It took about 15 years after the fall of Berlin Wall to embrace new countries into the European Union. There are, of course, reasons for that, economic, political, but behind was some, still some hesitation whether and if, how to embrace new countries in Europe. But European project cannot live with new borders, with new dividing lines. These dividing lines were abolished with the fall of the Berlin Wall. So these countries on the other side of the Berlin Wall had legitimate expectations to be part of the Europe, whole and free, as very clearly United States defined that, and of course to integrate. So that process took nearly 15 years. In 2004, the so-called Big Bang happened by inclusion of 10 new EU member states. Slovenia was a part of that. it is interesting to know from the U.S. perspective that at the same time NATO enlargement was also taking place. And what I'm telling always also to American partners, that we should not forget that NATO enlargement preceded EU enlargement always. So again, that means United States offered, an example, lead the way, for this European integration, because literally speaking, all new NATO countries became EU countries, literally speaking. So this was politically huge step forward. But of course, the European project has not been completed by that. The integration process must continue, and Slovenia is very much in favor of a further enlargement. There are still countries, especially in Southeast Europe, that are waiting to be invited to the European Union. But in terms of the perspective of the European Union, the year 2004 really meant a main breakthrough. But then, obviously, we all started to feel some fatigue with this process, because, of course, the ambitions were much larger than just simply to embrace countries into the new entity. What about building up European Union? That's why I say there was a conflict between these two processes. How to make European Union stronger. But to make European Union stronger, that calls, of course, consent of all member states. So what we have achieved with Lisbon Treaty in 2007 is what we have now, but Lisbon Treaty was a compromise already. When you look for a compromise, it means that you end up at the level that is acceptable to everybody. Everybody is equally happy and everybody is equally unhappy. That's the nature of compromise. But the substance of that compromise proved few years later to be insufficient. So now here we come to this, to the economic crisis that Europe is facing with. Euro crisis is real now. There's no reason to deny that. It is real. But I don't think there are any reasons to suggest that Eurozone will disappear, that will give away Euro as a common currency. But we have to deal with the deficiencies of this project. So today, to my mind, we have more a political crisis than financial crisis. As in the United States, as we hear and read, there's enough money in the banks. The resources are not that problem. The problem is, do we have proper institutions and the will of political elites to invest that money in something that will bring maybe better future. But of course, in terms of the European integration process, that means that member states should further give away their sovereignty. And that is so critical. When I described the first process of integration with embracing new countries, which for 60, 70 years lived in another world, this is still an issue of full cultural reintegration of Europe. And many European countries, they don't feel comfortable yet with that. That's why the integration process stalled. But when it comes to the deepening of the European Union, there are different kind of fears that came up. These fears are related to the danger that they may lose, their sovereignty. And with financial crisis, it showed up that we have to take some bold steps. Otherwise, the status quo that may happen will not be a status quo, but it will take us backwards. So we cannot have a standstill. We have to move either, or we'll go backwards. And this Euro crisis showed again that economic realities are happening faster than political ones. The crisis happened, but we had no political tools at hand to address this crisis. So what is needed now? What is needed now is greater fiscal integration. You will understand maybe that the fact that we have euro as one currency, Slovenia is also a part of Eurozone. Out of 27 EU members, only 17 countries are in Eurozone. So in fact, we already have here Europe of two speeds. And these 17 countries, members of Eurozones, they have to decide the way forward. And the way forward would be greater fiscal integration. And that means, consequently, that will reduce fiscal sovereignty of European Union member states. Now, that is such a bold step that, rightly so, many in European Union have second thoughts about that. That means that they would give away with their sovereignty in the fiscal area. But more and more, there are growing voices that this is the only way out. So if we want to continue to have one currency, we'll have to have one fiscal policy. Consequently, we'll have to have one finance minister, as you have. We'll have to have European economic government. And this is not something that I'm saying from this podium. This is something that EU President is saying, to other member states. So I think this is happening. These ideas now are floated, and member states will have to digest it. It is very much likely that this will take place in the very near future, and we have to make political ground, that will accept that. Now, that's why I'm saying that to understand the moment that we are in now, it is of critical importance to understand, how and why European Union came on the scene. And it is a moment where you need bold political leadership. Once history is written, there are no options worth to dwell upon anymore, because history knows only final solutions. But it has a lot of sense to dwell on options as we speak, because options always exist. So European Union has an option now. Either we want to move ahead, or we will be, in a status quo which will take us backwards. And it's not likely that all 27 will embrace this idea. That's why the idea of a Europe of two speeds is a very viable idea and very possible course of future development. As I said, we already have now Europe of two speeds, with those who are in Eurozone and those who are not. I don't know whether United Kingdom will join Euro. I don't know. I wish they would speak more about European Union, because so often when I read American newspapers referring on EU, they say EU and United Kingdom said this and that. So you see, the processes are going too fast, you know, to wait for everybody. And there is a critical level of understanding in European Union that if we want to compete in global markets and to continue to work with the United States hand in hand, we have to prove to be efficient partner in the global scene. And it is also in the interest of the United States to continue the process of further integration and strengthening of the European Union, because also the United States needs a strong partner in the global scene. There is no other partner like European Union in terms of economics, politics, whatever. There's no other partner in the world scene as European Union. So this is now the challenge that we are facing with. And Slovenia, as a small country with some experience in living in different settings of multinational institutions, I tell you, we invest all our money in European Union because we know that European Union is a democratic community that preserves our own identity as a nation of 2 million. Our MPs are speaking Slovenian language in Brussels, in European Parliament. That was not the case whatsoever in our history. So European Union is the one that is guaranteeing our economic prosperity, cultural identity, our political identity. So we are investing everything in European Union to grow further. And if need be, we want to be in the first track, in the first train, which will take European Union faster in its strength to the global community. Thank you. I'm open for questions. I didn't delve in detail about crisis because I wanted to explain you more the roots, the reasons of the crisis. So if there are any questions in this respect, I'm ready to answer. Please.
When you're talking, I hadn't thought of this, but all the states in the U.S. are at least supposed to have a balanced budget, which allows sort of a national monetary policy without worrying about individual states that are creating unsustainable debt obligations that potentially the national government would have to resolve. Is that pretty much what's going to happen with what you're saying would happen in the EU? You would have to have some sort of obligation that all the states cannot rely on the center to bail them out.
Well, in fact, EU has designed rules that would address this question of, budget balances and so on. The problem was that not all lived by the rules. Alan Greenspan, a few days ago, referred to the problem that EU is facing with as a problem between North and South. And it's interesting way of thinking. And when he said so, I start thinking of United States immediately after the Civil War. That was a problem of North and South, and North bailed out South, if you remember. South was bankrupt, and North bailed it out. But that was the price. It's always price attached. Price was greater unity. So there is a price now for bailing out certain states. The price is that these states will have to abide the rules. Some rules, since this crisis started, have even been more spelled out. The instruments has been created now to deal with these fiscal disparities now and situation that we have. And secondly, these states will have to accept certain solutions that will prevent EU to find itself in a situation that we are now. So.
Well, we may have to do the same thing with California and Illinois. So.
You can't have, design solutions to solve any problem any time. So, it's always in the making. And but the important thing is that that you have the way how to channel these disparities, these differences, and how to solve them. Nobody can expect that there will be just some higher authority to solve your problem. You know, we have a saying in Slovenia, help yourself and others will help you. And in Slovenia we also have a very simple saying. When I said that we were 600 years under Habsburg, I wanted to say that had a great impact on our national character. We have Protestant work ethic, and we are fiscally very conservative. And you know, we used to live that we cannot spend something that we don't earn, simple like that. And this has to be translated into the fiscal behavior of all member states.
How has the Turkish bid for membership been affected by the euro crisis?
There's no immediate linkage, but of course focus is maybe elsewhere. Turkey is also now in foreign policy focusing on other priorities, but that does not mean that they are abandoning their bid for European Union. That doesn't mean that their bid for European Union is off the table in Brussels. It is a politically sensitive issue, obviously, for a number of EU member states, not for Slovenia. We openly supported the membership of Turkey once, of course, they meet conditions as all others. You know, you must understand, EU is not, you know, a Lions Club that you simply join and you join and then enjoy some benefits. You have to fulfill certain conditions. And the further on the integration goes, more specific, more defined, more demanding these conditions are. And rightly so, not to prevent members from entering, but simply to prepare them, you know, to be able to live within community of rules. Because even when Euro was established, there were mistakes made, because this was a political project, obviously. There was a strong desire, you know, to go further on with deepening of the European Union, but political will of all member states was not that genuine. So it showed up with Greece and some other countries that they were not ready. You know, they did not fully fulfill all criteria for that. These are not technical criteria, they are very, very substantive. So Turkey has, and I hope it will continue, its adaptation towards European Union, and hopefully there will be areas where they can gradually be integrated more and more. And I think this is the way now how to deal with the broader idea of European integration, that maybe not full integration will be necessary. Frankly speaking, we have, as I mentioned, United Kingdom, that I don't know whether they will be ready to fully embrace European Union for the future. But that does not mean that they cannot enjoy the benefits of a certain common policies in certain areas, but not in all areas. Norway twice refused in a referendum to join the European Union. But in fact, they are fully integrated in European space. That goes for Switzerland as well. They could join, you know, immediately. But it does not harm them if, you know, they are formally outside, but in a daily life, fully integrated was what European Union is doing. So maybe something like that will be also possible with Turkey and with some other country, you know, in the neighborhood of European Union. Any more? Please.
What is the main economic strength of Slovenia?
We are hard workers. There are many Slovenes that are in the United States that were miners. So they settled, in Ohio, in Minnesota, in Colorado. But nowadays structure is, our GDP is created manufacturing 40% services, over 60 agriculture 2%. Why, your agriculture country, Slovenia is in terms of geography like Austria, for example, or Switzerland. So we have very hilly mountain. We are not self-sustainable in agriculture. We have to subsidize our farmers because they are small farmers, but more to preserve the way of life, because that's a part of Slovenian way of life. We also try to build factories close to areas where there were farmers so that they would not, desert the farmland, so that they could work in the farm, but also earn their salaries. But that is more to preserve the Slovenian way of life. Where we make money is basically in pharmaceuticals, electronics, home appliances, car industry, so more added value processing industry, because especially through the past 2 decades, as you have been challenged by the cheap workforce from other countries, so did other parts of the world, including Slovenia. So we gave away some time ago with our steel factories, our textile factories. We are very good in textile. I still use my suit from Slovenian one. I must say they are good, but today the price is important. So textile factories were very much tested, and so we are looking now more for industries where we can have some added value. Sorry?
What do you think should be done in the Greece situation? Are you for the bailout or something else?
2 days ago in Washington Post there was the first page news about Slovakia not endorsing the package. But I know you are not confusing Slovenia with Slovakia. Yeah. Okay. Because immediately I was ready, to answer questions, because we still continue to be confused with Slovakia, but we are good friends, we are very close as countries. Now we endorse the package for Greece, not only out of the principle of solidarity, which is important as a general principle in the community as it is European Union. You have to demonstrate solidarity within the community, as it goes in the family, no doubt. But in this case, it's more than just about solidarity. It's about the future of the project of the European Union. Do we want to invest into this future or not? This is in our interest to keep euro in the future and to make it stronger. So that's why we have supported that. But it's, again, it is not just lending the money. It is bailing out, is a part of the broader solution to this problem. And we cannot get out without taking, Greece out of this crisis. But Greece is facing severe problems. Somebody asked me yesterday, should he travel to Greece because there is a high dissatisfaction in the public? Of course it is. It's tough. The government has to adopt severe measures of austerity. They will suffer in years to come. They have to repay their debts. You have to repay. So it means that their benefits will be, much more lower and they will have to give up with some benefits, and that is extremely difficult, and that is painful.
You mentioned that you know, it's every compromise and that you're equally unhappy with the European when you joined the Union. What politically, economically, and culturally did most of you feel like they were giving up to be part of that?
No, that was, you know, I was talking about the nature of the compromise per se, but when it came to the decision of Slovenia to join European Union, there was overwhelming support for that. That was, we never, you know, faced some dilemma or some challenge in the level of public support to that. Because you should know that unlike other countries in the Eastern Europe, Central Europe, or we had market economy, you know, developed much faster than other countries. Our trade with Western markets before the dissolution of Yugoslavia was 67%. Other Central Eastern European countries, literally, they had very little trade with Western markets. So our management was very well, you know, trained and used to deal with Western markets. Now we have with EU 73%. So you see, it's not much big difference. So that was very logical expectation translated to the public from the, you know, political elites that we need European Union to, if we want to progress further on. So the support was not in question any time.
Okay, why don't we thank the ambassador for his time.
Thank you.